minus 10, 9, 8, 7.
So here's the thing about me. I hate hiking. And yet I've hiked 3 major times in my life. Granted, they were 3 of the most beautiful places one can ever hike. I hiked the Yosemite, a forest in Southern California, and the beautiful mountains of Sinai in Egypt. Still, all through 3 experiences, I genuinely wondered, why? Why on earth would anyone consider it a fun experience to climb up a mountain for hours, stay on the top for 30 minutes, and then descend again? I never got it. But the one thing that drove me to hike a second and then a third time was the fact that I'm a byproduct of a culture that promotes fear of missing out, stigmatizes the comfort zone, and glorifies the constant chase of experiences. Well, this event revolves around just that idea, right? It's the substance of the unseen that drives us out of our comfort zone to explore the what if. And although this has positively improved humanity as a collective, we're here to question the patterns ingrained in every one of us. And so I wonder, how might this constant chase of the what if be negatively impacting us? And as she said, please don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of the what if. Just one look at how I spent my life so far is enough to see that I'm a loyal seeker of the invisible possibilities. I've already been to 27 countries since 2010. I studied pharmaceutical science for 5 years, only to abandon my degree and pursue my passion for technology. By the age of 23, I'd published 2 poetry collections, 1 prose, and I focused on Arabic literature. I quit my corporate job, my horrible corporate job, and my terrible boss, and I bought myself a musical instrument. I completed several projects at the intersection between technology and civic engagement, one of which was aimed at monitoring the performance of the newly elected president in a country with 50 years of military dictatorship. I even got engaged at 21. And well, it didn't work out so well. My parents still wonder what I do for a living, and 80% of my friends believe I'm a spy. So that is me in my comfort zone. But let's step back a little bit and try to look at the big picture. I'll be tackling the comfort zone on 2 main levels, a macro level and a micro level. So on a macro level of humanity, we can't possibly talk about leaving our comfort zone and building a brave new space without mentioning technology and modern education. And by modern, I mean the school system that was modeled after the factories of the Industrial Revolution. So technology, the most living embodiment of this brave new space, is changing the world in an exponential way. Our computational power doubles every 18 months, according to Moore's law, and the world seems to be heading towards a state of singularity. But there's still an ugly face to that. We've built tools to connect, but we became disconnected. We've built platforms to interact, but we remained isolated. Social media is showing you all the great things that are happening to everyone else but yourself, while implanting this addictive need for instant gratification and attention like never before. This is the age of loneliness. A recent study in the UK found out that severe loneliness takes the lives of 700,000 men and more than 1.1 million women above 50. And it's rising with astonishing speed. And when it comes to education, through schooling, we're led to believe that there's only one pattern of education. And those who do not mimic the very same pattern are not educated and they remain stigmatized. The Western school system has led hundreds of thousands of people, even in the most basic and distant villages, to buy into this idea that their existence is obsolete through a structured process of planned obsolescence on human beings, offering this urban, modern consumer culture as the only inevitable option. But what's truly happening is, and they're actively pursuing that, and they want to secure that to their children. But according to what I see, what's truly happening is that we're pushing them away from their comfort zone, the relevant, sustainability fostering traditional forms of education through which they've managed to survive for decades independently, and then move them to an alienated model of knowledge in the city and the school that is totally disconnected from their surroundings, force them to get a good job as we define it, and eventually become part of the global economy. And the result is every single day, 200,000 people are moving from sustainable environments to the city, and many to live in slums. But when they fail, they don't even know how to survive in their original environments. They become disconnected from their own identities. And while the purpose of education is to produce human beings fully qualified to deal with life and its problems while communicating their best traits and ideas to the society, the Western school system has transformed us into unified, economically viable commodities in the form of employable citizens. And if we dive deep into the micro level of the individual, we're witnessing the rise of a culture that is actively marketing breaking free from the comfort zone as the only way towards self-realization. But what's the comfort zone, right? When I reflect on those two words, let me try to do that. Comfort. Comfort is the paradox of capitalism. The incredible technological progress and the rise of industrialization have been trying to make the life of everyone easier through automation and products. So here's the paradox. With this planned obsolescence of products and this kind of comfort comes more demand. You want more. And then you have to leave your comfort zone and work harder, get more resources that you can sustain your product-based comfort. An empty loop of workaholism and empty consumption that just misses the point. Now, when it comes to the word zone, zoning is at the roots of our contemporary urban practice. And those two ideas together tells you a lot about how I feel towards that term. But psychologically speaking, the comfort zone is any type of behavior that keeps your anxiety level constantly low. Imagine something that you're familiar with and you do all the time, like cooking dinner, commuting to work, or dancing the waltz if you're in Austria. And we know that because back in 1908, two psychologists, Robert Yerkes and John Dodson, explained that sustained comfort creates a steady level of performance. And in order to maximize that performance, we need to create a space where our stress levels are slightly altered to be higher than normal. But too much stress, our performance will suffer significantly. So the entanglement of this performance-driven model in our capitalistic world creates a definition of comfort zone that is built on a narrative of performing and achieving. Instead, I want to deconstruct this model and use a narrative of being, gratitude, and serenity. So today, the comfort zone is being marketed over three main propositions. The first proposition, it's essentially bad. Don't stay there. Inspirational quotes all over social media encourage people to step out of their comfort zone and embark on a post-heroic journey into the depth of the unknown, because theoretically, it's where the magic happens. Everything you want in life is over there, totally away from where you stand. And I believe this model is inherently self-defeating model, assuming that the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. It influences you to perceive yourself as extremely self-deficient. And on the road towards self-realization, every single day we're asked to be different, nonconformist, and take the path less traveled. And when Debbie Mandel argued that this notion is now overly prevalent, that it has become cliche, there was some truth to it. So isn't it possible that by taking the common and ordinary path, while with feelings of comfort and confidence, that might actually be the nonconformist path? For example, me sitting in my easy chair, listening to a good piece of music while reading a good book, that might have been the nonconformist path instead of hiking. So maybe we don't need to step out of our comfort zone, but just change the model. An alternative model by Carl Beschmeis invites us to visualize our discomfort as an orange block surrounded by a sea of comfort and certainty. This model focuses on the area surrounding the block. And it focuses on that we don't need to run from our core self to grow, from what gives us strength. We could rather use that strength to rather erode away our source of discomfort. Proposition number 2 is, now that you know it's bad, leave it as soon as possible. Last July, I turned 26, and I felt a bit unhappy. For the first time, I was officially closer to 30 than I'm to 20. And let me tell you, there's something particularly disturbing and alarming about this. And with the rise of our social isolation, we talk less about society and more about individuals within a narrative of heroic individualism and holy competition. And since achieving anything worthy of achieving is now linked to us leaving our comfort zone, the world today glorifies the invincible 20s like never before and expects every 20-something to succeed financially, romantically, socially, and even come up with the next big thing before it hits the scary 30. In a recent study by Dr. Oliver Robinson, an esteemed professor of psychology at the University of Greenwich in London, found out that 86% of the 1,100 young people participating in the survey, they were constantly feeling under pressure to succeed in their finances, their jobs, and their relationships. But the question is, has it always been like that? And the answer is probably not. This is a very modern idea. By the age of 30, Da Vinci was a typical loser by any today's standards. Marie Curie spent 7 years in poverty researching radioactive materials, and Faraday worked for 7 years as a lab assistant before he was even allowed to conduct any experiments. Proposition number 3 is leaving is ultimate good. When we respond to the call to leave our comfort zone and indulge into experiences, we often think this comes at a little or no cost. But within a perspective of happiness, gratitude, can it be costly? It seems to me that in experiencing life, people gain the knowledge that put them at a crossroads of two directions, one of happiness and one of suffering. And there seems to be, in some of the scenarios, no way to avoid the burden that may come with knowledge or the negative impact it might have on people. And nothing could wrap this up more than the story of Candide, a novel by the French Enlightenment philosopher Voltaire, written more than 250 years ago. So, Candide was a very simple, innocent man living at the Baron's castle. He fell in love with the Baron's daughter, Cunegonde. But of course, he wasn't noble enough for her, so he got kicked out. Candide's mentor, Pangloss, teaches him that in the best of all worlds, everything happens for the absolute best. That makes him very happy. Later, Candide engaged into a series of adventures through which he managed to learn about the various aspects of life. And throughout the novel, his purpose was to find and marry Cunegonde. And he's so persistent, he eventually succeeds. He evolves from an innocent little boy to an experienced and practical man. But then Candide started to realize that not everything can be looked upon positively. And some of the things happening are just not for the best interest of anyone. He developed a sense that the world is disappointing. And he started to cultivate his own suffering, becoming ultimately unhappy. In the course of gaining experiences, we might come across certain knowledge that may destroy our core convictions, beliefs, or ignorance, and as a result, our happiness. But I'm not promoting ignorance. Choosing to remain ignorant is just not our human nature. It's against our human nature. But the question that remains to be answered is whether or not acquiring more knowledge is always better. And when it comes to happiness, by and large, it doesn't really matter so much whether things were going well. It matters whether they were going better than expected. And this is not only a philosophical thesis. A recent study published just this August, a group of UCLA researchers conducted experiments where they involved 26 subjects where they take decisions that leads to financial wins or losses, all while being monitored by an MRI machine. Later, 18,420 people played a game called the Great Brain Experiment, and you can download it on your smartphone, which replicated the same experiment but with points instead of money. And they were able to reach an equation that can predict momentarily happiness. Here you go. And without going into details of the equation, what really matters is they found out that it wasn't the amount of total money won or points won that mattered. It was how winning or losing stacked up to our own expectations. In plain mathematics, the more expectations we have, the less happy we become. And in our everyday life, we consume experiences falling under the magic and the power of first experiences. It's the heroine of experiences. It's ecstatic, and you always want more of them. But when you consume more experiences, you have the probability of collecting more expectations. And with more expectations, it becomes really difficult to maintain the same level of gratitude. The Lebanese poet Wadiah Saada says, "Desires spoil outings. Those having desires no longer see the beauties of the road. The eyes come to be elsewhere, in the locus of desire, which does not settle. They come to be in the absent, the stolen, the non-existent. They come to be in no place." The infinite search for the new and interesting has pushed the new and interesting to quickly become commonplace and boring sooner than it should. A phenomenon which they've mentioned that is called hedonic adaptation, which is our natural tendency to adapt to our extraordinary surroundings that would become immune to its existence. For example, it's why if you eat every single day this mind-blowing ice cream from Zanoni and Zanoni or Stephansplatz, it may feel mediocre. And it's why we have this amazing, comprehensive repository of human knowledge ever created right in our pockets, internet or smartphones. And yet all we can think about is, why is it so slow? Can it be faster? So in one way, it helps us to advance. But in another, it prevents us from appreciating the subtle and the everyday. If we maintain this relentless pursuit and fascination of the unprecedented, we risk slipping into a vicious cycle of never being satisfied. And I'm not suggesting to stop learning, experimenting, or testing the limits of our comfort zone, but merely to develop a self-aware relationship with them. Understand the choices that we make and how they impact us. At the end, the purpose of this talk was not to provide any conclusions or statements, but rather to provoke questions, thoughts, and drive conversations. So that's all I'll be leaving you with. If Candide has held onto his simple life, he may have held onto his happiness. If you were Candide, would you trade experiences for happiness, knowledge for well-being, and achievements for serenity? The choice is yours. Thank you very much. Thank you.